Welcome to the Decide to Move podcast, helping entrepreneurs like you make smart, pivotal shifts in your life and business. Tune in each episode for inspiring stories from brilliant business minds and trailblazers to find out how they made their big moves and how you can too. Now here's your host, author, speaker, business strategist, CEO, and founder of Decide to Move, Monica M. Bijou.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Decide to Move podcast. And I always tell you that my guests are exciting and I love talking to each and every one of them. And today is no different, right? I have another guest that's here to talk to you, and it's really focused on the men, but women take heed as well because he's going to be sharing some really great information. Today, I have with me James Bush. Hi, James. How are you doing?
What's going on, Monica? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So if you can introduce yourself to our listeners as well as those that are viewing us via YouTube. Who are you, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is James Bush. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm also the host of the Mind of a Man podcast.
Okay. And so what's been your journey? How did you get into the realm of being a therapist as well as starting your own podcast? What drove all that?
For one, I went to Fisk University, and I dropped out of school twice, and went in a long exodus, and I call it an exodus, but an exile of working odd jobs. Licensed insurance agent at one point in time, working in a metal factory, and then after a while, something kicked in and said, "Look, you gotta get your ass back in school." so, so that's what kicked in. 11-year journey. Went, finished my bachelor's, got my master's, got licensed, and then here I am. And then so as far as the podcast, it was all the I call it the mortar or the cement between the bricks that I was learning about life because I was working with guys. I'm a young 20, 22, 25-year-old guy working with 40, 50, and 60-year-old men. And you're seeing a lot of the different struggles and the challenges and the frustrations that they're encountering on a day-to-day basis. Plus, a lot of them are felons. And so you're seeing how the system works against them and maybe not so much as for them. Things are getting better, but back then it was what it was. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of steam for the Mind of a Man podcast because there are so many conversations that as men we need to have, but not just from as far as drugs and whips, cars, women, and everything like that. Let's talk about depression, anxiety, what it's like to drop your kids off in front of the police station to your ex-wife. What does that feel like? Or as far as self-esteem, loving yourself, being connected with yourself. I think those things are so important, especially in this day and age.
It really is. And that is something that so many people do not talk about, but it is super important because of the fact that, oftentimes men suffer in silence when it comes to depression. And I remember when I was working, really started on my own journey of working in the mental health realm and talking to a lot of men. And I actually had a big group, and I had several men that was in my group that I did therapy with on the
Yeah.
weekends. And I remember one man, he kind of like slowly raised up his hand and he eluded. He was like, I just have to, this may be TMI. He's like, but when I'm depressed, I find myself wanting to have sex more. And another guy chimed in and raised his hand. He's like, yeah, me too. And it's like for some women, they probably think that there's something like they would think like, oh my God, my guy's super sexual without realizing that that could be a form of a depression because of the endorphins. I mean, we're adults, right? And endorphins cause you to have that feel good. It's like a feel good drug when people say exercise. And so depression is not something that most men feel comfortable even discussing or talking about.
When you just said that, there's so many different angles and avenues that I can go in with that type of conversation, especially as with men being, hunters, sometimes gatherers, and also too, just adapting to moments. So that's where the brain or the body just says, "Hey, look, This is happening. This is what we're going to turn on to kind of like right the ship to get things moving in a different way." Now, the key kicker in all of that is that when you're in a partnership with someone is for the level of intimacy and understanding. I'm not saying intimacy as in, sexual nature, but I'm saying intimacy as in if we're looking at the little game operation of you knowing how the nuts and bolts and how the tissues, organs, and the cells are organized within your respective partner, then you are able to kind of say, oh, I know what that means for him or I know what that means for her, or so per se. So it's very, very important when we are in those moments, especially if it's even a business relationship, that you can say, okay, I know where he's going with this. Let me not get in the way. Let me just play my role and stand back here and let them do it, because I trust that I've been around them enough. I trust the process of what they have, and generally it possibly works out.
Yeah, most definitely. And I definitely want to dive more into that. But James, what has been your journey, your experience, your personal journey that you've had going into where really helping men understand what they're feeling and emotion, educating them so that they can do better. But what has been your personal journey through all this?
Oh, stigmas, break stigmas, stereotypes. I think that was one of my biggest things, was unlearning a lot of stuff. Things that I thought were factual, things that I thought, quote unquote, were gospel, but they're not. And they weren't effective. They were just great ideas. And more than likely, they weren't meant to harm anybody. But in all actuality, it hurt myself, because somewhere down the line, I wasn't taught how to look at certain instances. Now, granted, I've seen that a lot, especially with our young people, where there's not a lot of male leadership in the household at times, and so they don't have the requisite model to teach them some of the fine things of life, about, especially about saving money, having good credit, being able to apply for a business loan. What does that look like? Separating business from emotions. Those things along those lines. Unfortunately, when that happens, we set ourselves up for not as favorable outcomes. And that's something that I've learned from my journey. Being able to um, operate from a standpoint that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be frustrated, but guess what? You don't cry on the battlefield. You go find your moment, you go find your time, and you decompress, you do what you need to do. You find that trusted therapist or that trusted individual who you can have those type of conversations where you can be vulnerable with. You're not trying to be vulnerable with everybody and their mama. That's not possible. That's not profitable. That's not helpful. And so learning those lessons. And also learning how to love myself more in this day and age. What does that look like? I remember I told you something off camera where we talk about loving yourself instead of lowering yourself. And I had to learn what that actually means for me. It's different from every person. It's how do I love myself? Well, if I'm at a situation where this deal or this interaction is going to cost me a lot of money, am I showing that I'm lowering myself, or am I loving myself by doing it? I have a decision to make. And generally, some people say, well, it could be yes. No, you know, generally, probably, if you had to think that long about it, it's probably no. Yeah. And so those are some of the things along my journey that I've had to learn. Now, granted, sometimes people who have been with you for a while, they don't like when you start saying no. It's not as fun, it's not as sexy, it's not as profitable for them. But in all in actuality, when you start to move in this space, you're teaching that person how to treat you going forward. So,
And I smile on that because I always tell my clients, coaching as well as therapy clients, your number one job is to teach people how to treat you, because no one else knows. We come with our own baggage, our own history, our own experiences. And so when I don't know what you need, right? As you know, say you're my client, I don't know what you need. I'm going to approach you the way that I approach all my clients. That is if I
right,
wasn't myself, because I'm the type of therapist as well as business coach where I work where my client is, figure out what they need, and then that's the strategy that we create based on their needs. But oftentimes you have people that have cookie cutter styles, and so they bring that and attempt to help the next person, and not everyone works the same. I actually personally had experience as with a business coach where I actually literally had to say, I do not, this style that you're doing does not work for me. Maybe for other people it doesn't, but it doesn't work for me. This is what I need. And they had a difficult time pivoting to accommodate. And it's like, well, then you're not the coach for me, because I literally need someone that resonates, that actually can work where I am and not where they trying to fit me into their mold in their box kind of thing. And so when you say that, that's super huge of making sure that people are not unlearning some things in order for you to be open up to receive new information. That's huge.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's big. It was big for me because, especially when in an industry such as business, you know, it, it doesn't differentiate. It's one of those things. Either you are or you're not. Either you're meeting the measurements, either you're meeting the goals, either you can do the job or you can't, or so like that. And in the end, what speaks true, what speaks volumes, is possibly the amount of capital that you accomplished in that industry per se. And so I had to look at it and I just say, okay, I've got some changing to do. I've got some growing to do. I can separate this by me charging fair market value for my services and what I do does not mean I'm a bad person. Does not mean I'm a horrible individual. It just means I'm expecting the same respect from you that you would give Kroger or Safeway or Publix or any other grocer because a business transaction is being done at that point in time. And I think sometimes, especially with males and some maybe even people of color, we have this idea that, well, I've got to hook my boys up. I got to hook my folks up. I got to hook my family up or so like that. I got to give them a discount just because of who they are. But where the respect come in those moments? It doesn't,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly. Because like when people, give things free, they're gonna treat it as if it's free. They're not gonna put the same amount of value when they have to go in their pocket. It doesn't mean that you overflate yourself, but if I have to go in my pocket, there's expectations I have when I'm giving you
Yeah,
things. And so I always tell my
right,
clients there's also a certain expectation that I have of you as my client, because I will fire someone. I mean, it's every money, every piece of money, every green is not always good money. And so there's some
nah,
people that you just really say, no, I can't, I'm not lowering my standards to work with you. And I actually had one a person I actually was, doing a consultation with, and they asked me, how much, and I told them, they're like, come on, Monica, you can't go lower. And I said, if you want lower over quantity, then you need to find somebody else, because this is
yeah,
my standard, and I'm going to pull from you and expect certain things just as you expect from me. And so
right,
obviously for us to even have to go there, it means that we're not even
yeah,
working together. So it's the same.
mm, definitely understand that.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I said I was going to go down that road, is when you talked about intimacy, and people don't understand that intimacy is not about sex, it's about connection and having business partners. And, so say from a business partner standpoint, and I see husband and wives going into business together, how do you find that connection, that ability to understand each other's role and pay attention? How has that really impacted businesses when they don't actually are not, like the things that you're working with your clients are really helping them figure out who they are, literally unlearn some things? How have you seen that impacted relationships from a business standpoint?
We don't have enough time to talk about
We can talk about as
that.
much as we can.
So, okay,
Give a
here's the thing.
couple things that you've seen.
I'm very sports oriented. Um, I look at different basketball teams and teams that were successful. You've got the '90s Chicago Bulls. You've got the Golden State Warriors. You've got LeBron James and the Heatles, as well as the Cavaliers or so. And I look at it and I say to myself, the teammates, for the most part, had an understanding. The successful ones, that is, had an understanding of what the other one was going to do. So if we're going back to the Bulls, I know that's Michael Jordan, who's a closer. I know Scottie Pippen is Mr. Versatile. And I know Dennis Rodman is, man, the defensive player of the year plus the rebound specialist. I don't care what he comes to work in, he's going to be at work and he's going to do his job. That's something that you can count on. You have Luke Longley's, you have the Bill Wenningtons, the set jumpers or so like that. They're not going to do the same thing as Shaquille O'Neal did. They're not going to do the same thing as Alonzo Mourning, but they know their role and they work well together. They know their role, they accepted their role, and they work well together. Is there conflict at times? Sure, it is, or so like that. But you know what, though? In the end, we're still coming all together to win. So let's transfer that same concept and that same idea to a relationship, husband and wife, a business partnership, or so like that. One of the things I find that sometimes people don't have a clear cut understanding is who they are in this role. You know, I may be I may be mom, I may be wife, I may be lover within the marriage, but in this business that we're doing or so like that, I'm the financier. You know, I'm the one that knows how to put together margins. Looks at cost and loss and benefits, profit and loss benefits, all the other kind of stuff that goes along with that. I understand that. That's what my skill is. And so if I know that about myself, I know what I bring to the table when it comes to us doing this business. And so then, as the counterpart, they know who they are. Where it gets murky is they try to merge the two worlds into one. That isn't profitable. That isn't effective. And so then the roles get blurred, um, feelings get involved in it. What was once at work now comes to the bedroom, and then the list goes on and on about, man, the confusion that goes along with that. Also, too, we mentioned intimacy. Intimacy is the ability of another individual being able to see inside you and know how it all works. How is it put together? What are some of the past challenges or the past events that have shaped this person to where they are now? So because I know that, I know where I can go and where I damn sure don't need to go when it comes to that person. And then as I'm taking the time, remember, it takes time to learn these things. As I'm taking the time to learn this about this person, and now I can accept what is taking place between us in whatever action or whatever organization or arena that we follow into. Great. So then I've taken the time, I'm sitting, I'm learning, and now the last thing is I've got to accept what I'm seeing, you know, because we can do all the research, we can do all the reconnaissance, but if we don't accept it for what it actually is, it's all for naught.
Yeah, and that's so important. I think acceptance is sometimes people's most difficult part. And then
Mhm.
also working with where the person's strength is. It's kind of like,
Yeah,
we talked earlier before we came on about gender roles and how that plays not only impact in a personal relationship, but rather in a business as well.
yeah,
And you will have people that we grow up with our gender roles, and the man's supposed to be this way, the woman's
yeah.
supposed to be this way, instead of figuring out what is each other's strengths and
What are
then
your strengths?
working from that. Because I grew up with a single mom, but my father was very much present in my life. And I'm also psychologically androgynous. I have the ability to always stay emotionally balanced when it comes to something. So I'll have a little moment and then I'm quickly able to bounce back and come up with an idea. So people go, gosh, you just like, you can go through that very quickly. Well, it's because I have that ability to kind of look at things from both standpoints. But
Mhm.
oftentimes we don't do that. We kind of want to, if, I find people say, okay, well, I'm supposed to be able to do this, but it's like, where does the word supposed to come from? Like, in whose mind and whose life and rule does that word resonate? I see that carry over into businesses as well when you have, whether it's two women, two men, a woman and a man, instead of them working from each other's strength, it's kind of becomes this huge uh, tug of war when it comes to hierarchy and prestige and different things like that. Has that been the same thing that you've seen?
Definitely. I mean, it's gotten me to the point where I don't care if you're an alien. If you can show me how I can eke out another 20 or 30% in my business, that's all that matters to me. Because the supposed gender roles and scripts that sometimes that we have occupied on, we don't even know the fine-tuned details of them. Why? Because we weren't given all the information. Why? Because a lot of times people like to leave out certain juicy things when they're telling the story. It's like, and you don't find this out till like maybe years down the line about what really happened or so like that. And it's amazing. I mean, one thing comes to mind when they talk about the Pythagorean theorem, and then they say, well, Pythagoras had some students, and now they're starting to say that he really didn't come up with that by himself. And I'm like, oh, it's just things along those lines. And so my point is that being able to say, okay, let's cut out all the other thoughts and traditional ideation and moments. And so, who am I and who do I need to be around for us both to reach that potential goal? Who is it?
Yeah.
Who can you work with? What are your core values? What speaks true to you? Are you a risk taker? Are you conservative or so like that? I mean, you don't want to kind of double yourself with someone that's just like you because you're just reduplicating the model. Sometimes you need to find some people that have strengths in other areas that you don't. Like sometimes I don't say lack or my not so strong point. I'll say that my not so strong point would be organization. But I have hired other individuals around me who can help keep me on task and who I'm communicating with, but just by quick phone. It's like, hey, did this happen? Did this happen? Yes, no, I'll take care of it. Fine. We work well together or anything like that. So I think knowing who you are, and having a clear cut understanding of that, of your gifts and your goals and your strengths, and also your not so strong points, because we always concentrate on my gifting, my gifting. Well, what is not your gifting? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But it'll make you effective in the end.
Do you have some strategies that you can help someone with, especially like right now, it is holiday season coming up. We're going into a new year. The
Hmm.
pandemic has really taken over the world and changed the way that we do things, changed the way that we think. And,
Right.
as we started off before, how depression is super huge right now. Well, pretty much before then, depression was huge. Now you're having people being laid off. You have
Hmm.
people who are changing, having to do a lot of pivotal shifts in their life. What things can you recommend or suggest to help people through this time?
Well, one of the things is I would like to say is just be an agent of change. Be the change you wish to see in your own life. So what that means, we have all this different technology. We have Zoom calls. We have what do you call it on the app, house party. We have all these different FaceTime, Skype. To be able to contact with one another or so like that. Doing random check-ins or so like that. It's not that you have to have a long, extended conversation, but things along those lines. Also, too, possibly even just getting a card, 99-cent card, writing a letter, sending it to a loved one or so, especially someone from the boomers generation, which that means a lot to them that I've seen. And so that could be something as well. You have these different apps and technology where you can send groceries or you can send a meal or anything like that. Some people I've seen, they've got it to the part where they host, hey, let's meet at 8 p.m. on this technological platform and have a drink together or so
Yep.
like that. And that's one way to, again, staying connected,
Hmm.
allowing someone to know how you're doing and let them know that you're in, mm, you care about them, that you are thinking about them, and that, man, you mean that much to them and they mean that much to you as well too. So it's little things that it doesn't have to be something very extravagant or so like that. Sometimes it could be a quick text. It could be a quick link from an email page. Hey, saw this. I know you don't like it, but guess what? I'm gonna bother you anyway. How you doing? And you just being you in that moment, whatever it is, whether it's your humor, whether it's your skepticism, whether it's your analytical skills, or whether it's just, man, your just existence. Being you in those moments and allowing others to see that. I think that's something that is very helpful. What I've noticed about depression is it can be very daunting when we start isolating ourselves. Because when we start isolating ourselves, then we start turning into unhealthy habits and possibly developing maladaptive patterns or so like that. Which, again, this COVID situation, it's not going to be with us forever. But how we come out of it is going to be very important as well too.
Yeah, and from a, let's even go to a biological standpoint. I'm about to give some people some little lessons, and they're like, ugh. But oftentimes when we're growing up, when we get in trouble, we're actually
Uh-huh,
taught to isolate. Go sit down, go in your room, go close your door, go sit in the corner, and all those things. We know that one of the stress hormones that's produced when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling down, is one cortisol. Well, the
uh-huh,
other drug that's released at the exact same time is oxytocin, which is that feel good hugging drug, connection drug, the one that we need. That's how you counteract that moment of depression, even when
uh-huh.
a person doesn't feel good or feel like being bothered. Sometimes just sitting there holding their hand or sending them, like you said, send them a card if you can't actually touch them, to let them know that you're there, that I'm here for you. Those are big, huge things to help a person like know that there's value to them. It's, instead, so you have people get upset when someone isolates themselves instead of them.
Uh-huh.
So my thing is, instead of focusing on what that person's doing, focus on what you're doing. Are you doing something to build that relationship, or you're doing things to further tear it apart? And so to me, that's super huge when it comes to that connection, the intimacy, knowing someone and understanding where they're coming from.
Exactly. I mean, it's very, 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 very important because sometimes people, I think it goes back to what you were mentioning earlier about communication, and communication can take so many different forms. So sometimes people they don't understand that I actually do care. I actually do have love for you, but because we are presuming love to look a certain way or a certain manner, we miss the whole message altogether. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel that for men it's different? Because I know a lot of the things you mentioned, tools that I think for some people are just confused by what a man needs in order to
Uh-huh.
help him during that time. Like I've heard somebody say send a letter to a guy, but they don't understand you're human beings and you need that connection. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I believe definitely. I mean, it doesn't have necessarily have to be a letter. It could be. Sometimes I've had colleagues. They've sent me a bottle of something, or a care package, or a gift basket, or so like that. Um, it's just about one, you knowing that person who you're talking to as well too, because you haven't just started talking to them. You've been around them. You kind of know some of their likes, their dislikes. So, he ain't gonna go for this. He ain't gonna like this, but he will like this though. And it's something as simple as that or so. And for guys, it means a lot, especially when they know that okay, she's checking for me. I know that this one could care less, but I know that one, yeah, she's checking for me. She's cool with me, everything like that. Man, we see that kind of stuff. So like that. Yeah,
Being
definitely.
being observant is super huge and important.
Oh, very important.
Yeah,
Very important.
and I have a lot more from my period on both ends. I have a lot of male clients, and that's one of the
Um,
things. I'll have ones that are married that'll bring their wife to meet me, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, so you're the one that he talks about all the time, and how much you help him." And it's a matter of just listening and understanding them, and so you form that connection where it's like when I'm given certain strategies, I know based on who they are and what
uh-huh.
works for them in their household, and so it makes a big, huge difference where people don't understand that it's really just starts with stopping and listening and paying
Yeah.
attention to what's needed.
Yeah, both. I think both sexes, both genders, we definitely have a lot of work to do in that one. When we begin to continue to see things from our own point of view, when we don't use as much emotional intelligence as we need to, which is necessary, then we get into these fixated ideas about what should happen and what should take place. When all actuality, if we could just stop and take a moment and just say, okay, I know what I am, I know who I am, I know what I do, but how does what I am doing affect that person over there? It may scare them, it may inspire them, it may empower them, it may make them laugh, it may make them cry, or so like that. But just taking the time to figure that out, I think that's just so important.
Yeah, most definitely. And we can go into EQ, and because I'm actually an EQ trainer, but that's a whole nother topic because I think emotional intelligence is something that I see a lot of people missing. And it's like it's so important from a business standpoint as well that when we teach it, the trainers and I that I work with, when we teach it is really helping leaders understand what they bring to the table and how it's impacting their team. And that's a big, huge part. So I love me some EQ, some emotional intelligence. That stuff is like amazing. Once you recognize where you are, the
Mhm.
differences that I see in people's leadership and their ability to connect in partnerships in so many different realms is huge. So,
Even in leadership, but even in our personal lives,
yes.
of understanding, man, that power or that you have as a lady or as a guy when you come around certain individuals and you understand, maybe a little bit about their background, and then understanding what you being in your role means to them. I mean, that's huge. And some people, I mean, and I've been guilty of it myself. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, I'm just doing. And they're like, no, you just don't get it, do you? And a lot of times I didn't. And so it's important.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like when you're being authentic, when
Uh-huh.
you're truly being authentic, that's when it really matters the most. And like, you heard people make the comment that, oh my gosh, this person is my world. Like they really changed my light. And you could be that
Right.
one person, can be the one that gives that person a aha that makes a big, huge difference, not only in their personal life, but in their professional and their
Uh-huh.
business as well. And so you never know, just by being yourself, being real, being authentic, never know. Like I've had so many people message me regarding the podcast, how who've listened and told me how certain things have impacted them, or the message that I'm giving, or the reason that I started my podcast. And it's like, wow, I knew what the reason why I started it, but I didn't
Uh-huh.
really understand the impact that it was going to have on other people.
It's
So
different.
just being real,
Different.
and authentic.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's
Yeah, because I
awesome.
mean, we connected on Facebook, being real and
Yeah.
authentic, and
Really
people
authentic.
know
Yeah.
the smile is 100% there because I'm always real, always authentic, and I just tell people the truth. And it's like I don't know how to be anybody else but that place. So that's when they come talk to me, that's what they're going to get real. They're not going to get sugar coated stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I just make light of the situation. It's like, and I use humor. I was like, now how the hell do you think that was going to work? Really? I just want to be honest with you. Did you sit down and think that through for me? It's like, are you sure about that? How long did you investigate this situation? Are you sure about that? And like, listen, I'm not trying to look. I'm not trying to bust you up too much, man. But I'm just wanted to say I'm on your side right here with this one. And so I love it because it pretty much one it takes the stigma out of well, I've got to be perfect and I've got nah, you ain't got to be, just be you, you know, just be who you are, and if you make mistakes, we all made them. That's all right though. They are teaching tools as well too, and there's times when some mistakes we do need to make, man, so that we can be more sharper and we can learn from that experience.
Exactly. I've actually had to even teach my clients how to just be okay with themselves. Just be okay. Like, just
Yeah.
give yourself permission to do whatever. Like, giving yourself permission. And oftentimes it's like, what? Yeah, just give
Yeah.
yourself permission. And, earlier today, earlier in the conversation, you were talking about being able to say no, how, like, when you say no, people get butt hurt, but it's really about setting boundaries and
Hmm. I
being
love it.
okay with teaching people what you will and will not tolerate, having
Love it.
boundaries.
I love it. I love that part. If I could say it is one thing that I enjoy, is I love being who I am in this season of my life. Being able to tell people the truth, being able to work on being mindful, being considerate, but working on my timetable. Sometimes I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. I'm not gonna have it. I want to take some time. I want to process. I want to mull over it for a little bit. I may have went and I've saw like 8, 10, or 20 clients between the time that I last talked to you that I'm talking to you now, or so. And I think that's my process. Respecting your process. Understanding that sometimes you may not be the person who's quick to answer or quick to respond, because I don't want to be reactionary, because I see enough of that garbage. And it doesn't really serve me well, for me, that is. But being able to be comfortable in your own skin in those moments when things look odd to other individuals is proved very effective. Why? Because it shows people that this is who James Bush is.
Most definitely. I totally agree with that. Do you have any additional things or strategies that you feel that will be beneficial? I know there's a lot that you can go into, but just a few
Uh-huh.
more things that you feel that will be helpful to people when it comes to whether in their personal as well as their professional. Because for me, you cannot leave one without the other. People who say that they're able to separate the two really probably are struggling with that because you're one person, right? And so you can be that one person with great ideas for your business, but then when you come home, some of it can carry over, but it's about being able to set this aside and then come over here. What are some recommendations that you have to really help people during this time right now?
If I can give one that's off the top of my head, I would say mentorship. You know, um, who are you feeding, and who is feeding you?
Mm,
I think that is so important, because when we look at, who are we getting our marching orders from, or who is helping us along this journey, or so like that, many times, we get into these spaces where we're just making decisions, we're by ourselves, we're just a lone gunman, we're operating in our silos or so. And while that, is very cool and it's part of that whole DIY mindset, there are other things that we can do more effectively if we link up and have the conversations and just talk to other individuals who are outside of our understanding, who have a different skill set, who can kind of, guide us in different ways. And then also too, when you are guiding another individual, because the benefit of teaching and understanding, and then you start to say, damn, yeah, I was kind of a little bit a loose cannon. So like I see that now. I was like, I can, you gotta look at yourself and like, yeah, man. And so I mean, giving that information, you're like, you know what? I need to go back. I need to do some things myself. Because when you give out, you can't help but to replace that and give to yourself as well too.
Yeah.
So finding those people, who you mesh well with. And I'm not saying mesh well. I'm not saying that, you guys agree on everything. Sometimes they're there, man, to light a fire under your pants. Or so like they're there to challenge you. So if you don't like to be challenged, that's cool. Find someone who is not as challenging or anything. The overall goal in the end is the outcome. Now, if the outcome is not proving to what you want to be, you got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's basically like something I'm always telling people, look for people that have like-minded and like-hearted when it comes to your values. And but also want to be with someone that actually is going to push you. And if you really want to go to the next level, then you have to be with someone that's where you desire to go. So that way you can learn from them compared to someone being at the same level or someone that you're hanging out with. Cause I actually had to make that conversation myself. It's like, okay, well, if I'm always teaching you, who am I learning from? If I got to go be with other people as well that's going to actually teach me and help me continue to grow. And so I actually have different layers of people that I spend my time with because of the fact that I love to teach, but I also love to learn. And if I'm not learning, then I feel like this sense of like something's not right. So
Right.
I'm a student of knowledge.
I mean, I'm definitely in agreement with that. Even in a romantic sense, what I tell one of my guys who have coming out of a long-term relationships when it just didn't work, I said, it's wavelength. Find someone that is on a similar wavelength as you, that inspires you, where it's like when you're sitting and you're in the training or you're in the coaching session and you're getting excited just, man, listening to them because they're like, that resonates with me. I mean, I'm enjoying this. I'm feeling this. I mean, I'm ready to go out there and start applying this. Or so if I'm sitting in the coaching session and it's just like, oh, ho, hum, oh, hum, oh, hum. that's not a fun place to be in, because I'm not passionate. I mean, I'm not feeling the transmittance of energy in that moment or so like that. And now whatever I've just sat and listened to for the last proverbial hour, I may just, man, let go one ear and out the other or so. And so, but when you find people that complement one another, that where it's just ideas and there's a flow to it, it's so exciting. It's so awesome. And that's another thing that I say in this day and season that I look for is, people of not necessarily like-mindedness, but people that are on that scale, that are on that wavelength, who get it, who understand, because then we can take that and go further together.
Yeah, most definitely. So James, how can people find you? How can they connect with you after listening to your episode?
You can reach out to me via email, james@bushcounselingservices.com. You can find me at my website, bushcounselingservices.com, or you can look for me on the Mind of a Man podcast. You'll see a big black guy with a brain, and I'm on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Deezer, iHeart. Just found out yesterday I'll be on Pandora, Google Podcasts, and the list goes on and on.
Sounds good. And I will definitely make sure I have that in the show notes so that I would definitely recommend that you connect with James. And I know that you're working on your own book that's coming out pretty soon too. So I'm sure that you'll be talking about that and be back on the show to have that conversation. Well, once again, it's been amazing having another great guest with me. I'm Monica Bijou, CEO and founder of Decide to Move, as well as the host of this podcast. And James, I just want to say thank you so much for being with me and educating our audience so that they can actually take their life to the next level.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Humble.
Thank you. And until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Decide to Move podcast with Monica M. Bijou. If you are ready to make a pivotal shift and take your destined position in the world, then schedule a free discovery call by going to www.decidetomove.com. For all links mentioned in today's show and to listen to previous episodes, go to www.decidetomove.podcast.com. And remember, We've all been delivered rotten fruit in our past. We can choose to chew on the rotten fruit trying to convince ourselves it's what we want, or we can become the fruits of our labor and create an incredible, fulfilling, and inspiring life and business out of it. You have what it takes to create the life you want.